And set our motivation. This first session is going to be explaining the retreat and explaining how it's going to run and the background concepts behind it. And our first meditation session will be the next one. So we'll just take a minute to connect with bodhicitta, and then I'll do some explaining. So if you find yourself a good meditation posture, straight back. And just thinking to ourselves, the purpose of our life is to free all living beings from suffering, bring them perfect happiness. In order to do this, we must understand the causes for suffering, the causes for happiness, and remove the causes for suffering within our own mental continuum, develop the causes for happiness within our own mental continuum. In so doing, being of greater and greater benefit to others. Our assistance being more precise, more purely motivated, more effective. Therefore, we do this retreat on the 4 close placements of mindfulness. And in your mind, just arrange those concepts in the words that resonate for you. Let them sink in. So you can relax your attention. So the 4 close placements are a little bit more advanced mindfulness practice than just kind of your everyday kind of spa treatment mindfulness, which is still lovely and effective, but this is mindfulness 2.0. Okay, and I'm really excited we can do a whole retreat on it, because normally I just do it as a weekend course, and we sort of basically touch each one, and you kind of get a general sense of it, and then back into life. So we actually have time to touch each of the meditations deeply, and hopefully deeply enough that you can then bring them into your daily practice in some way and really start to integrate them into your life. So mindfulness in general, we know what it is generally, right? But how do you describe it in more precise terms? If you say, what is mindfulness in the context of meditation, how would you describe it?
Just being aware of
Yeah. Yes, quite right. Yeah, being aware, right. Yeah, I like that you didn't say, be more vague. Yeah, be more vague, more spacey. No. Yeah, being more aware, absolutely, of what kinds of things?
Thoughts, feelings.
Yep. Thoughts, feelings, etc. Can you practice mindfulness without an object, a mental object? Can you just sort of abstract wispy mindfulness?
You have to be mindful of something.
Exactly, you have to be mindful of something, right? You have to be mindful of something. There needs to be at least a background agenda, right? A background agenda, even if the background agenda is watching what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Even if it's not specifically, it needs to be directed, right? So it's not a passive mindfulness. And it's not just, in the Mahayana tradition, it's not just being aware of what you're doing while you're doing it, but it's bringing bodhicitta to each of those. So making sure that whenever we are mindful, that again, it's not just for today, not just for ourselves, not just for temporary stress relief. If we have the biggest motivation, then those little things will happen anyway without extra effort. So if you're thinking, in order to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, I'm watching the breath, then you're creating the cause for enlightenment. You're moving the mind and developing momentum towards enlightenment and having quite a nice day, right? So, that's sort of achieved as a byproduct. But if you aim for, I just want a nice day, then the momentum ends at the end of the day. Yeah, and the energy's kind of lost, right? So we're going to start from the very outset trying to have the biggest motivation possible. Mindfulness, kind of more specifically, is just a mental factor, right? It's the mental factor of single-pointed attention on a familiar object, right? And a mental factor is something that moves and directs the mind and makes the mind able to experience, right? So we have our main minds, the aspects which are clear and knowing, reflective, less judgmental, right? Observe the generalities of our objects. The mental factors then direct the main minds on what to do with them, how to hold them, how to process them, etc., etc. So we have these two main aspects of mind, and the mental factors are pretty much in charge. And they're either in charge in a good way, or in charge in a neutral way, or in charge in a dodgy way, right? Usually dodgy, right? But what we're doing is kind of taking the reins of mindfulness and saying, look here for this reason. Oh, you're distracted? Okay, come back, right? And the instruction for all of the meditations that we're going to do, the basic instruction is the same. When you get distracted, come back, right? Just come back. Don't come back with a punishing mind that thinks, what a terrible distracted person I am, isn't that just like me, right? Not like that. Not with, oh, it's only right that I'm distracted. I'm a very busy person with lots of things going on. I'm allowed. Not that. Not, oh, my distractions are so interesting. Actually, breathing meditation is boring. But I'm just going to go off in this reminiscence. Yeah, not that, right? What you do is you go, oh, I'm distracted. Whoops, come on back. Yeah, or I like to say, anyway, right? You notice yourself going, shibba, 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 you know? You need to say, anyway, come on back. Yeah, so don't load your observation of distraction with all sorts of extra bits, because it makes it harder to let go of. Yeah? If you have to justify your distractions, then it's much harder to just say, oh, it's a distraction, come back. It's like, okay, you are having a fight with your mother. That's happening. It'll still be there when you finish your meditation, right? You can come back to it, right? You can still be having your epic financial disaster and your crippling debt. That issue will still be there after your meditation. And what's more, you will be in the best position to cope with your life if you're more steady, right? If you're more focused, if you're more steady, then whatever is going on for you, good, bad, indifferent, you're going to be in the best position to deal with it. It's when we're stirred up that we make choices that we regret, right? And as soon as we're steady, our wisdom is accessed, right? So the four close placements are basically in terms of subtlety, and they're all ways for us to understand the Four Noble Truths and the Four Seals, right? So the four close placements are placing our mindfulness on body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. And we'll basically spend a few days on body, a few days on feeling, a few days on mind, a few days on phenomena. And we'll just gradually work our way through them. And all of these trainings are found in many, many sutras that the Buddha taught, but in particular the Satipatthana Sutra. And the Satipatthana Sutra is included in your course materials. So if you're wondering, what did the Buddha have to say about this? It's just here. Right? So this is straight from the Buddha. This isn't mindfulness light, right? This is straight hardcore Buddhism. But again, you take what's useful, and if there are parts that are a bit too hardcore or not useful for you, you just leave them to one side. There'll be a lot of different trainings, and some of them will touch you right away, and some of them will be a bit more abstract or not, and then you'll just wait for the next one. Yeah. So this is all from the Satipatthana Sutra. Both the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition practice the four close placements. We have slightly different approach, but all forms of Buddhism do these practices. Within the Mahayana context, we talk about them always from the bodhicitta perspective, right? From the Pali tradition perspective, we're talking about them in terms of getting out of samsara, in terms of nirvana rather than enlightenment. But generally speaking, the practices are quite similar. Each of these can be used as an object of either single-pointed attention or insight, right? And in the Pali tradition, sometimes the meditations kind of combine both aspects, which is why it can get a little confusing if you're mixing around traditions, and it's totally excellent to mix around traditions, but just know there's going to be a slightly different approach. So in the Mahayana tradition, we're much more likely to separate single-pointed attention and analytical attention as two very separate tools. So we'll do some meditations just single-pointed and some meditations just analytical, yeah, but the same object, yeah. And, you know, just to frame it as well, when we talk about what is our path, what is our practices, usually we talk about the three higher trainings, the training in ethics, concentration, and wisdom. This falls under the category of wisdom. You would think it'd fall under the category of concentration, right? And of course concentration is used, but actually all of these are for helping us develop insight into the nature of reality. And then as a byproduct, you get really good concentration. Yeah. So this is a really full, really rich, beautiful practice. And through observing the four close placements, we come to understand the Four Noble Truths. We come to understand suffering and origination. We come to understand cessation and path through observing the four close placements. Yeah, so it's our access into the Four Noble Truths. And we also come to understand the Four Seals, which is that all compounded impermanent phenomena are subject to change. So some of our meditations will be watching for impermanence, right? We'll be looking at the second seal, which is that all contaminating phenomena are in the nature of suffering. So you will come to understand directly, rather than in the abstract or in the intellectual, that when karma and negative states of mind are playing out, we suffer, right? We already know that. We know that even experientially a little bit. But, you know, to really touch the moment-to-moment unfolding of how we ruin our day, right? The moment-to-moment unfolding of how we destroy our own peace and disturb this mind which, when it settles, is naturally quite happy. Yeah, when the mind is not disturbed, when there's no additional aggravating factors, when you're not making it boil with anger or attachment, when it settles back down, it's naturally quite content. You don't have to then add contentment to it, right? The mind, when it's not disturbed, becomes quite content. So, so being able to touch these four seals in a more direct way can be so useful for not getting hooked in our life by the old things that trigger us, right? And then we come to understand that all phenomena are empty and selfless. So our advanced practice of each of these will be looking at emptiness, yeah, the emptiness of inherent existence. So that'll be quite fun because we have quite a simple object, so we're not completely thrown by huge philosophical concepts. We'll just use the body, you know, nice and solid and clear. What is the body? And then, oh, does it lack inherent existence? What is the body? Where is the body? Yeah, is the body the self? Oh, felt like it. Yeah, identify with it. If someone says, you're beautiful, or someone says, you're fat, we immediately think, I, right? So we do think the body is us, even though we sort of half know better, right? So to really like unpack those negative ways of identification is so powerful. So it's easier in a way because we're taking this complex philosophical concept, but the object is pretty simple. Yeah, so it can make it a little bit easier to understand. And then the fourth seal is nirvana, is peace, and that's more the result that we come to through these practices. Yeah, so how are you going so far? Are you overwhelmed? Are you clear? Context established? Context overwhelmed? No? Good. Excellent. Okay, so the four close placements we're going to do in terms of the Satipatthana Sutra, which means we're going to do basically all of the main headings within it. So, so you want to have a squiz. Here it is. And it's at the back, starting on page 12. So you see it has nice, lovely headings with numbers and everything. It's really lovely set out. And at the bottom of page 12, it says contemplation of the body. And the first one is mindfulness of breathing. So mindfulness of breathing is mainly what we'll do today, which is a nice way to settle into retreat, because I'm guessing that we all have a basic idea of mindfulness of breathing. Yeah, has everyone done some sort of breathing meditation? And so just as a quick refresher, when we're doing mindfulness on the breath, what we're doing is trying to stay as close to the breath that just happened as possible. Yeah? So in theory, you're with each breath as it happens, but practically speaking, you're playing catch up, yeah, with the breath that just happened. And eventually you want to get to the point where you're actually focusing on the sign of breath, the generic image of breath. Because the breath itself is a moving phenomena, and we're trying to develop some single pointedness. So where you focus the breath is here, at the nostrils where the air comes and goes. And, for a while you're just trying to get a sense of it. Yeah, and for a while actually your breath is just trying to get itself sorted and settling down. But you don't want to be controlling your breath. Right? So it even says right in the sutra, when you're breathing short, you know that you're breathing short. When you're breathing long, you know that you're breathing long. And you're just knowing. That's all you're doing. Nice and simple, just knowing the breath. And if it helps in the beginning, it helps to count. Yeah? Count to 7. Yeah? So out in 1, out in 2, like this. And what you're doing is you make sure it's a mental count. You're not counting on your fingers, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work, right? You go 1. What's that bird? 2. No, right? So the counting, again, is the journey, right? It's not the goal. So if you only get 2 breaths before you're off with the fairies, it's fine. You just start back at 1 again, right? You're not like having a sense of accomplishment when you get to 7. If you get to 7, you just start back at 1 anyway. Right? So it's not really about getting this sense of achievement while counting, okay? It's that the counting itself steadies you. Yeah, so you count to 7 breaths, and, rounds of 7, until it feels like you're getting steady enough to not need counting. And that'll be totally up to you, right? It might be that you don't need to count at all if you're already quite settled. But, for the first couple sessions of retreat, even if you're really good at meditating and you've been doing it for years, just being in a new space with new people, sometimes it takes a while to settle. And if today you find yourself a bit tired or a bit sort of buzzy or something, it's really normal, right? You're in a new space, you're not at your house, you've been traveling, you have life things that you're gently disengaging from. So, just be really gentle on yourself today. The middle of the retreat is where you want to be the most strict and the most sharp and the most concentrated. The best way to approach retreat is a bit like an almond or like a barley grain, right? Where you start nice and gentle, 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 and then in the middle is your strongest concentration, and then gentle, gentle towards the end. And then when you go back into life, it's less of a jolt, right? God, traffic, right? So just very gently approaching it that way, and the middle of our retreat will be feelings and mind, which are kind of the most epic ones anyway. Okay. So that's mindfulness of the breath, nice and simple. And then we'll do postures of the body and mindfulness with clear comprehension. So those two, they are being aware of like postures and activities. So today is a good time to experiment with this without any particular tightness. Just be a little bit aware in between sessions of what your body is getting up to. Yeah, just like, oh, I'm walking. Yep. Sitting. Yep. Right? But it's so interesting that when we're on autopilot and when we're really distracted, we're so out of our body, and you're really far gone if you come around a corner and someone almost bumps into you and you're really shocked. Yeah, then you're really not in your body. Yeah, when you get really startled. When you come around the corner and someone else is there and you almost bump into each other and you go, oh, hey, you're very in your body. Yeah, so that jolt, that shock, that's a good kind of litmus test for how out of your body have you become. And Being in the body is a really good way to minimize the tension that can build up in your body from sitting so much. Yeah, because when we're sitting, it's not regular for all of us to be sitting on the floor so long during the day. And different tension can start to rise, different little pockets of ouch. And if you're mindful of the body, you can kind of be aware that you're tensing up your shoulders, in response to some other muscle, and be like, oh, put them down. Right, down you go, there you go, back to normal. Or you notice your lower back starting to kind of gather a bit of a knot. You consciously release it. Yeah, so today, really be about the body, really be about settling. Yeah, and keep it nice and simple. Your bodhicitta motivation, just a quick, for others, click. Okay, the body. Yeah, you don't have to go into a whole long song and dance about your bodhicitta, whatever your current level of understanding is of it. Something altruistic. Yeah, you think, not just for me. May inner peace lead to outer peace. Nice and simple. And today, just be with the body. So, the postures of the body and the clear comprehension sections of the sutra, these ones are really describing ways that we can use what we're already doing in our daily life to tie us to mindfulness. Yeah, you're drinking anyway, you're eating anyway, you're going to the bathroom anyway, you're walking anyway. And so we can use these things as our anchor to the present moment. The body has no choice but to be in the present because it's physical. It has no choice. So when the mind focuses on what the body is doing, it naturally becomes present. Yeah. So again, when we're present, we're focused. When we're focused, our wisdom's accessible. And you don't even have to be thinking any of that. It just happens naturally. Yeah, so just nice and simple. And then we get into the more full-on bits. Okay, so just so we're nice and clear from the outset, on page 14, number 4, the reflection on the repulsiveness of the body. Okay, so no one developed body dysmorphia as a result of this retreat, okay? Why on earth do you meditate on why the body is yuck? Why would you do that? What's the point? Yeah, just intuitively from what you know so far, yeah.
Maybe to understand that we are not the body.
Very nice, yep, to understand we are not the body, or to help disengage from that identification. Yep, that is one reason, yeah. What is another reason?
Because we tend to say, I tend to think, oh, this is quite nice, I need to make sure it's okay.
Yep, some hand creaming and yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's to help break our attachment to the body, right? It really is. So it's in no way to look down on the body. Because what we want to say is, this vehicle is the perfect vehicle for awakening. Yeah, we have a human body with a human brain, which means we can process information in a different way to animals. If we were an animal, we would not be studying, right? We would not take notes, we wouldn't meditate. We might accumulate some virtue if we're like a mother animal, right? Or if you're a father animal seahorse, they're real nice, but I mean, like, we don't do a lot of virtue as animals, right? So we're not in any way looking down on the human body. We're looking at the fact that we're very attached to it, even if we hate it. And that's tricky. That's a tricky one to sit with. That even if you hate your body, there is attachment. Yeah, because attachment is exaggerating, right? It's exaggerating the importance, it's exaggerating the significance, blah, blah, blah. It's really thinking this is me. So when we do this meditation, we're actively grossing ourselves out, okay? Yeah, going through all the bits, like the pus and the blood, and like it's an active gross out. Yeah, and at the end you want to be like, oh, everyone's gross, right? No. But you're trying to break your identification with the body and really to see that these fleshy bits are not you. These fleshy bits are not actually that significant in terms of your spiritual path. It's like a set of clothes that are slowly wearing out, and someday you're going to get a new set of clothes. But if you spend your whole life trying to maintain this bag of bones, at the end of your life, you have to leave it behind, and what you're left with is your mind and its habits. And that body you spent so much time looking after and caring for is going to turn into dust, and here's your mind now with all the habits of obsession with body, So it's just kind of like putting things into some perspective. It's also a way for us to have compassion for other people. Yeah, because we realize they're also a gross bag of bones, right? And yet identify with that and are very attached to it. And it can make the human condition quite poignant. You know, you think, oh, poor sentient beings obsessed with their bodies who aren't even them. Right? So if you can touch that in you, then when you see that in them, it develops compassion. If you don't touch that in you, and you see that in them, it develops pity, right? Which then is looking down. Yeah. So anytime we can have this self-awareness, it really will help our compassion to others. Is that all right? So when we do repulsiveness of the body, we're trying to gross ourselves out. This is also really excellent if you're very attached to someone that you shouldn't be attached to. Remember the poo. There's poo in there, right? Seriously, right? It worked, right? You want to hug and kiss and get all close to something where poo is just that far away, right? It's gross. Really helps. Anyway, tips from a nun, right? That one that's so shiny and clean, right? And the surface layer of the skin is dead anyway, right? Yeah, gross. So gross. Yeah, anyway, it helps. Okay, so if you're really far gone, it doesn't help, right? If you're like a teenage boy or something, they don't care. But for us, right? For us. All right, so then on page 15 we have a reflection on the material elements. And this one I think is quite fun. This is quite a deep practice that you may have touched in another context if you did the death meditation. You know the death meditation, that 8 stages at the time of death where you go through all the disillusions that happen when you die, when you fall asleep, etc. This is a simpler one. And it's basically checking in with the 4 main elements, right? So first you're sitting with, what is the earth element in the body? What are the solid bits? Yeah, what is earth like? Yeah, and then you go, what is fire like? Where is the heat in the body? And just kind of experiencing the heat. And, where is the fluid? And then how is that fluid moving? And it's quite an interesting way to look at your own form, to think of it as built up of these same 4 elements that the earth is built of. It's quite interesting. And then it starts to kind of blur that sense of, here is where I stop and the earth begins. It's like you're just made of the same stuff. Yeah, and it can again help understand dependent arising and the emptiness of inherent existence. So this is one of my favorite ones. I quite like it. And then we have to do more grossing out, right? We have to do the 9 cemetery contemplations, right? Which is basically imagining your corpse as it decays. Yeah, so that's fun, right? Buddhists are hardcore. Don't worry, as we get into close placement on feeling, mind, and phenomena, it becomes much more sort of beautiful and magical and spacious, but the body contemplations are a little hardcore. Yeah, so we won't do this one today. It'll come in a few days, but just so you're oriented if you're reading your handouts, that you're not freaked out. Okay, so people that work in hospice maybe already have done this one, but this is a really excellent way to understand impermanence. Yeah, it's a really excellent way to understand impermanence because you're thinking of, what would it be to sit next to a corpse while it decays? At first there's a similarity between a living person and a corpse. But, if you've ever been with someone who's dead, it's interesting that there is something that shifts about the atmosphere when the consciousness leaves. It's like, that was a person, and now it's a body. It's a weird thing. And so it shows us again that the body is not the self. Yeah, and so then when we sit with our own mortality and kind of imagine our own body disintegrating and eventually becoming a pile of dust, it sort of really brings to light that sense of, this is changing, this is going, this isn't me, and when it's gone, there will be still a continuum of consciousness that's different to this body. So in a way it can be a great relief. Yeah, in a way a great relief. This would be much harder if you were doing it with a loved one or something, right? And that's another practice that you can do at another time if it helps you kind of make peace with the truth of death. But in this context, we do it for ourselves and our own corpse. So you imagine as you are, the age you are now, the health you are now, but dead, right? And then yourself watching it slowly decay. It's great. It's great, okay? So anyway, all of these things work for connecting with all Four Noble Truths. All of these help you understand the 3 marks of existence, which are those first 3 of the 4 seals. So, it's so useful to do a bit of a read in between sessions and just kind of like refamiliarize yourself. And basically the way I've built the text here is that there's the sutra itself, but then in the beginning you've got just good context on what each of them are. So if you're feeling a bit lost in the meditation, just go back and have a read. Yeah. And I've chosen a few different excerpts from different texts, so hopefully one of them will resonate. And during the retreat also, there will be time for question and answer once a day. And if you prefer to have total silence and you don't want to be disrupted by hearing a conversation, it's completely okay if you want to skip the question and answer session. Yeah, so if you're feeling like today, I don't really want to ask anything, I don't want to hear what other people are asking, I just need to sit with myself and do my own personal study, journaling, reflection, nap, right? So if you want, please know that question and answer session is totally optional. But occasionally, when you do enough sitting, you just get this niggling doubt or this niggling thing you just kind of need to air. So I'll be here, and if you want to come and ask things, you can, but please feel like if you need a session off, that's your session off. Is that cool? Do you have any questions?
One question at the very beginning when you mentioned that when we did the breathing meditation, we're sort of playing catch up. So basically, what you say is that we're not observing the breath going in and out, but actually noticing sort of that past and out. There was the breath. Is that?
Well, it's more like that's what's actually happening, but in your mind, you're thinking, I'm with the breath as it happens. You're trying to be with the breath as it happens. It's just that in reality, you're actually playing catch up. Yeah, and so as our mindfulness gets better, the lag time gets shorter and shorter until we really are one with the breath. But that takes a while.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. So, the breath, for some people, is like the perfect object, and for some people, never really does the trick. So, either way, know how to do it and then take it or leave it. Yeah. In the Mahayana tradition, we usually use it as a preliminary to whatever comes next, because it does help settle distractions. But if you have, sometimes people with a history of anxiety, with a history of trauma, who are, a bit busy generally in their heads, folks like that, sometimes focusing on the breath actually makes them more aggravated. Yeah, and if you find yourself in one of our breathing sessions getting a little amped up, or only breathing in the top part of your lungs, which can happen when you're a bit anxious, if you can consciously let go of the focusing for a second and just pull the breath down into the abdomen, and even focus at the abdomen rather than at the nostrils, if you're having one of those sessions where you're a bit unsettled. Just like pull it down. And if the breath itself is becoming really troublesome, let go of it and focus on your feet, all the way down. Yeah, so that's quite nice. And be like, how are the feet? A little cold. I like my socks. Okay. Right? But even just that moment of just sitting with what are my feet like, it pulls the focus down. So if for some reason you are having a aggravated breath meditation, go ahead and pull it down. Yeah. And the other thing that we want to make sure to do is when we notice distraction, how do we approach it? And as I said before, we don't want to approach it with like a punishing mind or with a justifying mind or anything like that, but we do want to confront it. And if you're having a session where it's a battle to stay focused, allow yourself to push pause and just come back to, why am I doing this? Yeah, it's like you just push pause on your MP3 player, and you're having a little regroup of, why do I do this? Right, because most of my mistakes come from distraction. Yeah. That car accident in the 90s, if I'd just been focused, wouldn't have clipped that guy. stuff like that. If I'd been focused, I wouldn't have said such and such to that friend and hurt their feelings, etc., right? Just simple little, right, why do I do this? To stop making so many mistakes, hurting myself and others, right, back in. Yeah. Or, something more profound, like, if I really want to develop my mind, concentration is essential. Yeah? And just like physical exercise, sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's not. It's a skill, it's a tool, it's something that requires some effort. And what's joyful about it is knowing what it leads to, and sometimes the process is joyful. And sometimes not, right? Sometimes if you're going for a long walk or a run, you're like, don't really want to be running. Ow, my knees hurt, right? Not like I run, right? If a bear was chasing me, right? But it's an interesting thing to think about, though, that we're sort of expecting a kind of bliss or an instant gratification sometimes in our meditation. And usually when you actually have those blissful meditations that are all kind of magical and glorious, it's when you stop trying, and you just did the instruction as best as you could, not worrying about what's going to happen. So just have that kind of checking in with, have I gotten too tight or too loose? Just gentle adjustment. If I'm really battling, push pause, check in, why am I doing this? And then come back in.
I've found when I've tried this in the past that to actually do like stretching, like to kind of helps release whatever the tightness is.
Absolutely.
And makes me kind of
recalibrate.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't whack your brother when you stretch. I mean, you could, but.
I have a question. Like, English is not my first language, so phenomena. Like, I don't know
if it's an English thing or a Buddhist thing.
No, translating.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because even native English speakers get confused, so it's probably not the English. It's just phenomena in this context means everything. Everything that exists.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a phenomena, this is a phenomena, this is a phenomena.
Okay.
Yeah. So all contaminated phenomena means things that are born from karma and from negative states of mind. Those things turn into suffering, right? When we say compounded phenomena, what we mean is impermanent things that change, moment to moment change. So those things that change moment to moment necessarily disintegrate and end, right? And give rise to something else, right? But to know that everything that is produced will cease. Everything that comes together will fall apart, including this, right? So knowing those, it's a big piece in Buddhism and it's ongoing, but if you can just sort of touch lightly, And when we say all phenomena are empty and selfless, we mean that everything that exists empty of inherent existence or independent existence. It doesn't arise by itself. And that when it's selfless, that none of those things contain a self. So it sort of feels like the body contains a self, when in fact the self is labeled on it. So it's just going more and more subtle. And when we're talking about all phenomena, that's a bit abstract. Really, we're talking about the self. And, so the phenomena that we're particularly looking at is body, feelings, mind. And phenomena here means mental factors. So mind means basically the main minds, generally speaking. And, like eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, those main minds, which are clear in knowing and reflect. Phenomena in this case is more the mental factors like discrimination and recognition, being able to distinguish between things. Intention, the part of the mind that moves. Attention, the part of the mind that holds. So when we get to that phenomena, the last one, what we're really looking at is how each of these different pieces in the mind doesn't operate by itself. You know, like an opinion. You know, it feels like an opinion just arose out of nowhere, when in fact, as soon as you unpack it, you're like, okay, this opinion came from this experience and from this observation, and if I hadn't been so hungry, I would have been nicer about it, and, you know, many things came together, and now I have an opinion. But the illusion is that it just came out of nowhere, and that it's true, and mine. Yeah, it's mine, it's true, and it's spontaneous. None of those three are true. So this last level of subtlety, that's what we're talking about with phenomena, is internal phenomena. Yeah, does that help clarify? Yeah. Yeah.
There's a distinction between contaminated phenomena and compounded phenomena.
Uh-huh.
Can you give me an example of a compounded phenomenon that is not a contaminated phenomenon?
Yes. Thank you. Nice one, Brian.
Can you get back to me on that?
Yeah, thinking about it, yeah. You could think maybe something that arises in the mind of an Arya Bodhisattva, but arises.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, compounded just means produced, impermanent. So something that changes moment to moment isn't necessarily contaminated by karma and disturbing emotions, but usually, right? But usually.
Buddha.
Yeah, and I almost went straight to Buddha, and then, you know, the Buddha's mind has an aspect that isn't compounded. Yeah, the Buddha has an aspect of the mind that is permanent and unchanging. So then I was thinking, oh, don't say Buddha, Trixie. I did go there first, and then I went, no. The Geshis will never forgive me. You know, or you could say, I think probably the easiest is to think something that arises in the mind of an Arya Bodhisattva. Perhaps say a seventh ground Bodhisattva to be specific. Yeah, to be nice and clear. So it's seventh ground Bodhisattva thoughts. Still arise and dissolve, but not causing any trouble. Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's basically going in levels of subtlety, because it's so easy to think that the teaching on impermanence is the same thing as the teaching on emptiness, and they're actually not the same. But one leads you to the other very easily, right? By seeing that things change moment to moment to moment, it very kind of naturally gets you into thinking, oh, and not by itself, you know? Oh, and not with self. Oh, you know, it's a nice kind of sneaky way to get you in there. Yeah, or a more coarse way. And, you know, coarse impermanence we understand very easily, but subtle impermanence we don't grasp at all. We have a subtle grasping at permanence, just like we have a subtle or not so subtle grasping at ignorance, right? You know, it's in there. If we did not have subtle grasping at permanence, we would have realized the truth of our own death. Yeah, our denial of death, our not understanding that today really could be the day that we die, is a symptom of our subtle grasping at permanence. As well as just basic things like procrastinating. You know, putting things off is a symptom of grasping at impermanence, or grasping at permanence, excuse me. So thinking that things don't change, we suffer, because they do. Yeah. So the first two seals, well, all of them really, but you know, this teaching on impermanence and the teaching on selflessness, these are not necessarily religious concepts. They're just in a religious framework, right? The fact that things change moment to moment is shown by science quite easily, right? And the fact that nothing arises by itself independently is very, you know, has been proven by all sorts of forms of science, neuroscience, quantum physics, etc., etc. So our job is to not be too smart for our own good and decide that just because we know that, we've realized it. Because those are quite different. Yeah, and so this is why it's so nice to do retreat, because we actually have the space and time for all these teachings we've had to sink in. Yeah, and to actually touch something and unlock something. Yeah. Do you have any other questions or questions about how we're going to structure the retreat?
Do you ever give one-on-one time sometimes during these retreats?
Yeah, upon request. By request. So basically just ask or put a note to Sarah, and usually in the lunch break, and we can find a nice Buddha to sit under or walk around the stupa. Yeah. So if you have stuff coming up in the retreat and you want to do a one-on-one because you don't want to talk in the group, then just send a note to Sarah and we'll organize it. Totally. And let's see what else. So we're not in strict silence. We're in quiet, which means when you come into the Gampa, try not to talk to each other in the Gampa. If you want to talk to each other out of the Gampa, totally fine, quietly and mindfully. But if we can sort of keep this space really quiet, because it might be that some people come in and do sessions out of the formal session time and just want to do some sitting when they're alone, and then you come in early and they're sitting, don't have a chat, just sort of keep this space really quiet except for during the question and answer times. Is that all right? And then if you want to talk outside sessions, you can. Lunch, again, just mindful eating, yeah. But if you want to talk to each other and connect a little bit, that's okay. And if you want to be in total silence, we can put out silence badges. Yeah, and they're just there by the stupa. So if you'd rather not engage, that's totally fine too. So if you see someone with a little orange tag, then don't talk to them. But this isn't like a strict Goenka Vipassana style thing where you can't even look at each other. Look at each other and smile, right? Don't be weird. Yeah. And also because we're Westerners and we're less familiar with these processes, sometimes strict silence makes us tense. Yeah, and we sort of can get like an awkwardness or a brittleness. So if instead you just think mindful speech, quiet generally, that makes it a little bit more spacious. Yeah. And if you just want to chat to someone because you need to kind of blow off steam, you can. Yeah. But sort of be aware of like volume. And sometimes if you're aware of volume, it naturally makes you more mindful about what you say. Yeah, so if you, it's interesting, right? If you think, I have to whisper, then it's hard to like whisper about gossipy things unless you're a teenage girl, right? If you're gonna talk, it sort of becomes a little bit more focused, So like that. Is that okay? That kind of silence. So just quietness. And at night, at night, just kind of keep it even more. Yeah, kind of like do this like nicely settling sort of thing. Because what happens is if you start a conversation in the evening, if you've been having a really lovely retreat all day, your mind gets nice and clear, and then you add one conversation into it and you won't be able to sleep. Yeah, so sort of say to yourself, when it gets dark, maybe stop chatting at all. You don't have to, there's no rule, right? But just kind of to know once you start to do retreat, very small things can capture your attention and really pull you off, and it makes it harder to sit. Yeah. Or if you check your phone or something, don't check your phone, right? Or if you have to check your phone, don't check it before bed. Yeah, because right before bed, then even it's the most benign text, like, hope you're having a good retreat, from your mom or something, you'd be like, what does she mean by that? What is she trying to say? Do I not normally? Oh my God. Even if you're not normally neurotic, because you're getting sort of settled in retreat, like the simplest thing can kind of like get in there, like a rock in your shoe. So just, if you can not look at anything that is not Dharma and not talk about things that aren't particularly Dharma, and just sort of keep it a little bit more sensitive, because you will get more sensitive as the retreat goes by. So it will take less to trigger an obsession. Yeah. And you might become a little obsessed with food, maintenance, warmth, renovation ideas, landscaping plans. This happens naturally during retreat, where it's so confronting to look at your stuff. You start to obsess about really nonsense outside things. And be like, why did they put the drainage there? They should put the drainage there. And they get really obsessed. It happens, right? So I'm just naming it so that we can tease each other about it if it starts to happen later, to know it's totally normal. And you might start to just like hate one of the retreatants for no reason. It happens. Yeah, it does. You're like, why do they sit that way? Right? Seriously, it happens, right? Trust me. So you might just have that kind of like, right, perhaps it's more about me, right, coming back. Or you might fall in love with someone randomly as well. It happens, right? You get weird fixations. And if you can just treat it with the same, anyway, back to the practice. Yeah, don't justify it, don't suppress it, just anyway. Yeah.
And we also set a boundary for the retreatants that you may not speak to the cook.
Oh, good, yes. Poor cook.
Mention that, so that if you are obsessing about food, You're not allowed to speak to the cook. You must speak to me.
Talk to Sarah about
Yeah.
food, yeah.
You have to talk to me or you put it in the communication book, but yeah.
Don't bug the cook with lots of requests and things.
Yeah, like if you didn't like the food, don't tell the cook, tell me. And we talked at the beginning that it's probably a good idea to stay on the grounds, but how strict is the boundary?
Basically, if you walk all the way to Colville, you'll talk to people who are not in a Dharma space, and it will probably distract you in a way that's not helpful. If you need to go for a walk, go for a walk, but I would recommend staying on the property. But, you know, if you go all the way down the road, you know, to the sea, because you really, really need to just smile at people, but don't talk to them. And they're so lovely and chatty, they will talk to you, but don't, like, stop and get a cup of coffee, you know, and, like, read the paper. If we were doing very strict retreat, we wouldn't leave the property at all. So if in your mind you feel like, actually, I could hold that, I could stay on the property, go ahead. But if you feel yourself about to pop, because you're getting a bit of cabin fever, it's okay to walk, you know, down the road to the sea and just let the mind be spacious. That is one of the antidotes to a tight mind, is having a good view. So if you find your mind getting a bit crowded, look at a view, but also if you just walk to the top of the hill, you can see the sea from the top of the hill, and that helps. Just be careful of the cows. Yes, close the gates. Yep. Yep, good rural etiquette. Yes, right. Were you going to say gates? Close the gates.
Oh, yes, quite. No, I was just going to suggest walk to the top of the hill, but
Yeah.
yes, close the gate.
Don't let the cows out. Or the sheep. Yeah, is that all right? So really, just look after yourself. If you find that you're getting a really tight mind, a nice view, a gentle chat, chocolate, these things are fine, right? Like, just look after yourself and be nice to yourself. It's if you're getting into that, I'm bored and I need to entertain myself, or I'm triggered and I need to fill up the space, then it's not useful. So only you know, right? Only you know why you're doing what you're doing. So just kind of have that, yeah. And, and sometimes I worry about naming the things that could happen, like it's inviting them. But actually, I think if we just sort of speak it right off the bat, then it's easier to see yourself kind of falling into those normal retreater traps. Yeah, and it could be that you have a totally easy, cruisy, obstacle-free retreat and just slowly go into the depths of reality and unlock some cyclic existence, in which case, take us all with you. Right? So that could happen. I don't know what y'all are up to. So, it's a really beautiful thing. And we have some nice books on mindfulness at the desk back there. If you don't want to read or write at all during the retreat, that can be quite helpful, just to make yourself not elaborate. But sometimes it helps to elaborate or to get more context. So again, it's just knowing yourself. Yeah, do I just need a bit of space to digest what's happening and to digest what I already know? Or actually, do I have enough space that I can bring in a little bit more information about what is the nature of feelings, and think about it a bit more actively to then bring to my cushion? So again, only you know if it's a good call or not. But again, I wouldn't recommend it right before bed, because it'll get your mind kind of woke up and spinny. Yeah. Any other questions?
But also possible to take precepts. Is it we take precepts at 6:15? Do we do that beforehand?
6:15. Sunrise isn't until 7. Yeah, I know. I know. It's amazing. Yay! Yes.
What is that?
Precepts. Yes, I'm glad you asked. Yes, so precepts is optional, but we all have to come. So the first session is at 6:15 in the morning. And in that, basically is a practice where we're setting our motivation really strongly for the day. And we'll do some mantras, blessing the speech, and just some various preliminary practices to get ourselves oriented. But if you are already kind of into retreat, and you want to make it stronger and you want to create more positive karma, we're going to do like a 15-minute practice called taking the 8 Mahayana precepts. And you can find it in this book, actually, and maybe Sarah can help you find it after the session. You can read it. But basically, it's like being a monk for a day. Yeah, and it also includes not eating after lunch, because sometimes having an empty stomach when you go to sleep makes more clarity, makes more freshness in the morning for your meditation, and it also helps interrupt your attachment to food. Yep, or increase it, depending on your mind, right? Anyway, it can help. Some people get really spacey with no food, or really, low blood sugar grumpy with no food. So just kind of know yourself and make sure to let the kitchen know well in advance if you're going to be on precepts that day. But
they have to write it in the communication book by dinner time tonight what their plan is.
Perfect. Okay.
It's up in the lounge.
So anyway, precepts is, the prayers are beautiful prayers, and we'll say all the prayers together except for the vows themselves, and the vows themselves, just the people that want to do it. Yeah. I mean, there are things like don't kill, don't steal, I mean, they're nothing that you're going to object to, but you might object to the food. Even though in theory that's the easiest one. Like, no killing, no worries. But lunch, dinner, everything. So anyway, anyway, it's optional, and it's just a nice practice. And one of our teachers really strongly recommends doing it just to add a lot more positive karma to the rest of the practice. It's got huge significance and lots of benefits, and maybe we can dig out a few of the commentaries and pop them on the lounge table about precepts. It's beautiful, and it's a really good way to connect with the bodhicitta motivation. But yes, if you're having blood sugar issues, don't do it. Okay, so I'll see you at 11. And maybe somebody can take away the board, because we don't need it now.